Well, welcome everybody. We're going to get started now. This is the Bucks County Pedestrian Safety Study meeting. This is our first public meeting, and obviously we've invited municipal officials as well as some members of the steering committee, such as SEPTA and the TMA. This project started as we realized that there are some serious pedestrian issues as it relates to vehicular traffic in the county at certain areas. So we applied to DVRPC for some funding, and they were gracious enough to supply us with some transportation, community, and development initiative funding. And with that funding, we hired McCormick Taylor to perform the study. In 2018, over 6,000 people were killed on the nation's highways. In Pennsylvania alone, that number was 90, and there was quite a few in Bucks County as well. And unfortunately, the trend is actually going up instead of coming down. And so we thought it was our duty to come up with some hopefully some improvements, some education on some specific areas in the county that we identified through some crash data analysis. So again, I'm Rich Braylon with the Bucks County Planning Commission. Also represented here is Evan Stone, our executive director, and Christian Ray Gosh, who's our transportation planner with the county. We hired McCormick Taylor, and it's led by Eric Schmidt. He's assisted by Christina Alt, Matt Galinas, and Erica Morgan. So Eric's going to run through a presentation for us on some of the initial work that he's done as part of our study. He's starting to gather some data, came up with some good ideas already. We didn't want to get too far ahead of the game before we involved the public, and took some feedback and spoke to people about what they see as they're out there going to work, going to school, whatever they happen to be doing that involves these particular corridors. So you can provide feedback through our chat box by throwing some questions out there. We're also going to have some breakout rooms, 2 specific breakout rooms to cover the 4 corridors. Those 4 corridors are 3 on Street Road. 1 is from Knights Road down to Humeville Road. 1 is from Buck Road to PA Boulevard. And the other one on Street Road is from York Road to Newtown Road. And the other intersection we're looking at is US Route 13 at the Levittown Parkway. So once Eric's done his presentation, we're going to see if we have enough time for quick answers to those questions, but what we'd really like to do is get to the breakout rooms where we can get more specific. And those breakout rooms, Christina's going to help me out, and we're going to put people in those rooms based upon the registration link that you provided that indicated what your corridor of preference was. So at that point, I'm going to turn it over to Eric for his presentation. And again, if you have any questions, just feel free to type them in the chat, and we'll keep an eye on that and answer them as we can, if not in the breakout rooms.
Great. All right. Thank you, Rich.
Yep.
So let me make this full screen. Everyone can see my screen, I assume. All right. So like Rich said, my name is Eric Schmidt. I'm a project manager, traffic engineering with McCormick Taylor. I was born and raised in Bristol, PA. I lived in Bristol and Bensalem for many years, so I come with some local knowledge here. We are looking at 4 locations, as Rich stated. We have 3 locations on Street Road, 1 up in Warminster, 1 in Lower Southampton, and another in Bensalem. And then we have this intersection of Levittown Parkway and Route 13 in Tullytown Borough. So we had the kickoff meeting back in December. We had a steering committee meeting just before this. And now we're at the public meeting stage right here in March 2021. After this, after we gather feedback from the public, then we develop concepts, and we'll have another round of public meetings later this year and revise those concepts after that feedback and develop the final report. Again, all slated for this year, 2021. What we've done so far, we've reviewed crash statistics. We've looked at where the crashes are occurring and any obvious patterns that stick out from the numbers. We've looked at where driveway openings are, where intersection geometry is a problem for pedestrian safety. We have a lot of identified gaps in sidewalk in all of these sections, missing ADA ramps and ramps that are substandard in terms of ADA compliance. We've also identified physical obstacles that would prevent us from making those sidewalk connections, things like guide rail and poles that would need to either move or the sidewalk would need to move. And we've also looked at a couple of locations where we can possibly put pedestrian bridges over the roadway, one on Street Road and one over Route 13. And we'll talk about those later. So what we plan on doing after we get feedback from this meeting, we're going to focus our research on the issues that are identified, take a deeper dive into the crashes so that we know, how many are left turning crashes, how many involved a person running across the roadway in the dark, things like that. We'll prioritize sections for consolidation of driveways where we have closely spaced driveways, too many driveways. We'll look at that. We'll also look at specific sites that could use adjustments to make it safer for pedestrians. And we'll start developing the concepts. So the first location here is Warminster Township. This is Street Road between York Road and Newtown Road. Over a 10-year period, we had 4 fatal pedestrian crashes, 30 injury crashes involving a pedestrian, which is far too many. We have these clusters here that you see on the map, York Road, Lewis Drive, Jacksonville Road, and Hardman Lane. And it's these clusters are pretty spread out here. And you can see where the fatals occurred. There was one at York Road, one at Jacksonville, and another one down here at near Hardman. So something that's very common at all of the locations on Street Road are the frequency of driveway openings. As you can see in the photo here, we have 5 driveways that are very closely spaced. What we would look at this location, again, this is Street Road and Newtown Road. We would look at consolidating these perhaps into one driveway, or at least reduce this from 5 down to 1 or 2. And logically, that may be, one driveway opening at the signal so that everyone can make their turns in and out. But this is a very unsafe situation for pedestrians walking through this area. You would have to have your head on a swivel, so to speak, as you walk by all of these driveways and conflict points. Let's see, further to the west of this, that's pictured here, is the Jacksonville Road signal. There's a Sunoco on the corner that has a driveway that opens right to the intersection. This is another thing that we'll look at various locations, driveway placement in just bad spots. At the Mearns Road signal, we have 2 driveways that abut each other. You have a long distance where pedestrians are exposed to vehicles for a long distance. So again, these are just some things that we're going to look at. The picture on the right here is the York Road signal. As you can see, these are long crossing distances, poor sight lines, a lot of conflict points between vehicles and pedestrians. From a traffic engineering standpoint, this intersection may have to be this large, unfortunately, because of the amount of vehicles coming from each approach. But we can look at squaring up these pedestrian crossings, perhaps consolidating the crossings so that, for instance, anyone coming up Street Road, making a right onto York Road, they have 2 conflict points with pedestrians. Can we combine that into one? Can we square this up? Can we look at possibly flashers for that pedestrian crossing there to make it more safe? And we'll look at different treatments that could slow down the vehicles coming through this section as well. Not pictured here and just to the east of this intersection is the Nativity of Our Lord, which is a large school with an unsignalized crossing across Street Road. This would be a focal point of our study as well. We would look at high visibility crosswalk markings, perhaps a pedestrian refuge island, flashers. We could look at RRFBs, which is flashers that would only occur when a pedestrian is present, things like this. This section of Street Road between York and Newtown has over a mile of missing sidewalk connections. It has 27 driveways and 24 curb ramps that need upgrades to ADA compliance. All right, so the next section down Street Road that we're looking at, Lower Southampton, over a 10-year period, we had 2 fatal ped crashes, 4 injury ped crashes. You can see where the 2 fatals occurred, where there's actually no pedestrian facility on that side of the road, on the north side of Street Road. We have a cluster near Mill Creek and Buck. That's near the railroad overpass, if you're familiar with the area. We had the other fatal is down near Westview Avenue. So this is the signal at Buck Road. Obviously, no pedestrian facilities here other than a pedestrian signal. There's no refuge for a pedestrian. They would have to walk in the shoulder if they're on this side of the road. There is brush that is overgrowing the traffic signals here. Again, something that we could address in conceptual design. So what we would look at here is creating a safe haven for pedestrians, curb ramps, possibly sidewalk, bringing a curb out here, things like this. So in this section, we have over 1,600 feet of missing sidewalk connections. There's also various businesses along this stretch that there's no delineation between parking spots for that business and where a pedestrian would walk. So that would be something that we look at in conceptual design, tweaks to these sites to make it safer. And finally, the third location on Street Road is between Knights Road and Humeville Road. Knights Road, you may recall Time Magazine labeled this intersection as the most dangerous intersection in the US, or something like that, back in 2014. We had 7 fatal ped crashes and 41 peds injured in this section, and a lot of them occurred at or near the Knights Road intersection. That's where a large cluster is happening. Other small clusters were down at Asbury Avenue, Hansel Drive, where we had a fatal, and Humeville Road. And I should note that this section of roadway was part of a 2008 PennDOT DVRPC road safety audit. We will take that into account as we develop concepts for this section. We'll take those recommendations into account. So in this section, we have a lot of missing sidewalk, 4,300 feet of missing sidewalk, 30 ADA ramps that need upgrade. Again, the frequency of driveway openings, the close nature of these driveways is a problem next to the high-speed turning vehicles. We do not have full ped access at a couple of spots. The signal at Humeville Road and Ben Salem Plaza Shopping Center, there are only 2 crossings out of the 4 approaches. So what we can look at is why those 2 crossings don't exist. If we can change that, if that's due to traffic operations, we'll look at the operations of the signal to see if we can correct that and make it safer for pedestrians. Also in this section, as you can see in the photo, there's no sidewalk on that side of Street Road in this section. There's a guide rail there. And there's a couple of pedestrians that are trying to navigate that side. And it seems like they do this regularly. They walk down the grassy hill there into a ditch and up the other side to get where they're going. So these are things that we'll definitely focus on in our concept design. All right, and here are two trouble spots in this section. One, to the photo to the right is the Kohl's Shopping Center access. It shows you this what I call a freeway exit to the Kohl's Shopping Center, where you have speeding vehicles taking this ramp, and there's very little protection for pedestrians. There's no marking for the crossing, so that is something we'll look at. High visibility crosswalk markings, slowing down vehicles, possibly adding flashers here. One option we could look at is raising a crosswalk here so that vehicles have to slow down. There's a physical feature that they wouldn't want to fly over. So we'll look at a number of things here to address pedestrian safety. The photo on the left is the Knights Road intersection, which many of us are familiar with. We have long pedestrian crossings where they are really out in the middle of nowhere, and they're very susceptible to conflicts with vehicles. There's poor sight lines. Now, there is some rather new facilities out here, but we would look at tweaking these facilities to make it safer. Slow vehicles down, get the pedestrians more visible to the drivers, and we would look at, you have tight right of way on most of these corners. The gas station on the that would be the northeast corner that requires pedestrians to walk through the property to get to the intersection. So we would look at what kind of tweaks we could do there. We have vehicles that run red lights frequently at this intersection, so we'll look at treatments that we can address that with. Yeah, so that will be a heavy focus of our pedestrian study and the concept development here at Knights Road. So one of the options at Knights Road is to put in a pedestrian bridge. What you see in the photo there are 4 possible locations. We're only thinking about one pedestrian bridge, just to make that clear, but these are the possible locations in red and blue. So there are some trouble spots with putting in a bridge, of course. You have overhead utilities, you have tight right of way. There's also the question of, even if we do put in a pedestrian bridge, would people use it correctly? Would people still cross at the road level, even though this pedestrian bridge exists? So these are some of the things we need to think about when we're thinking about a ped bridge. All right, and the final location included in our study is in Tullytown Borough, Route 13 and Levittown Parkway. One of the legs of the intersection is the SEPTA Levittown Regional Rail Station. We have 1 fatal ped crash along Route 13, 5 injuries in this area. And the intersection was recently modified for the SEPTA station. But there are many things that we can look at to improve safety for pedestrians in this area. One thing would be in the photo you see here, there's a Dunkin' Donuts driveway at the top of the photo, if you can see my mouse cursor. That's a wide driveway where pedestrians are, again, out kind of in the middle of nowhere. Vehicles that speed around the corner would have a limited amount of time to react to a pedestrian in their way. You also have vehicles coming down Levittown Parkway that can make a left or a U-turn in that missing median there. So there are a lot of things happening in this area. We would look at possibly closing up that median. We would look at whether U-turns would be allowed at this intersection, right turn on red, those sorts of things. The southbound Route 13 approach has a wide shoulder that's not really marked as a lane, but it is used as a lane. There's no stop bar there, so vehicles don't really have any instruction to stop at a certain point at the intersection. So we would certainly look at that as an improvement. The DNL trail is this worn path here that kind of ends at the sidewalk. So we would look at a more logical connection to the DNL trail that possibly connects to the sidewalk and the crossing at the signal instead of in the middle of nowhere. So these are some of the things that we'll look at in concept design. Yeah, and we'll also look at a sidewalk connection for the Levittown Town Center, which is on the left side of our photo here. There's no great way for folks to take SEPTA to this area and walk to the shopping center without walking a bit out of their way. So we would look at a possible sidewalk connection there. And this is the second location where we're looking at a pedestrian bridge. The most logical spot for that would be on the southern side of the intersection, as you can see in the drawing here. It would be a 110-foot span over Route 13, and it would have right-of-way impacts, of course, on both sides. So now I'll turn it over to Matt Galinas.
Thanks, Eric. I'm Matthew Galinas. I'm a traffic engineer, and I also work with Eric at McCormick Taylor. So these are some improvements that could really be applied throughout the corridor, any of the 4 locations that Eric went through. Specifically, we could apply, some or all of these throughout the corridors. First would be replacing or refreshing or installing new crosswalks and using a higher, Eric had kind of used the term high visibility crosswalks as he was speaking, sort of these larger white block crosswalks that are shown in that top picture instead of just the 2 parallel white lines. So it makes the pedestrian crossing stand out quite a bit more than just the 2 white lines. Some things Eric also mentioned, consolidating or adding markings to driveways to make it more clear where driveways are located. There are some stretches, I think maybe specifically on the Buck to Pennsylvania stretch, there's kind of long stretches of sidewalk, but there's driveways and it's not entirely clear where driveways start and end, where people should be expecting cars to be turning in and out of, so trying to make that a bit more clear. Also, another thing Eric mentioned, ADA ramps, bringing the curb ramps up to the current standards. We may have locations where there is no ramp at all today, or may have ones that were built to older standards that don't meet the current accessibility guidelines for folks who are maybe in a wheelchair or maybe could be pushing a stroller or walking pets, things like that. Curb ramps really help those folks navigate. And also no turn on red restrictions. Based on the crash data I've gone through so far, I haven't really seen a trend of crashes with folks making a right turn on red, but that's not to say that there's not near misses happening out there. Problem that we have with turns on red is when a driver is looking to make a right turn on red, they kind of get a tunnel vision of looking for conflicting traffic that's coming from the left, and they may forget to also check for that pedestrian who could be coming from the other direction. So right turn on red restrictions could be investigated at the signals. Eric, can you flip to the next slide? Something else to look at is the pedestrian signal heads. So upgrading those to the countdown pedestrian signal heads that shows you the amount of seconds you have left in the crossing. A lot of the crosswalks out there today either have the older style pedestrian signal heads that don't have that countdown information, or they're just crosswalks that are controlled by a green, yellow, red traffic signal. So we would look at upgrading those where we don't currently have them. One more thing that's a little bit more in the traffic engineering world, but PennDOT District 6 has been kind of adopted recently, the flashing yellow arrow signal. So what you're probably used to seeing along this corridor and in the kind of greater Philadelphia area is this picture on the left where you have this signal that sort of looks like a doghouse. What has kind of been adopted in the area and has been shown to be safer for both pedestrians and drivers is the picture on the left where you have your green arrow, which everyone's sort of used to what a green arrow means. But then when you're allowed to make a left, but you're waiting for a gap in conflicting traffic and pedestrians, instead of just having a green circular indication, you would have a flashing yellow arrow. Again, that's been research has shown that people just kind of intuitively understand better that that means I need to wait for a gap in traffic and pedestrians. And this note on the second bullet point there talks about this thing called pedestrian omit, kind of just a fancy way of saying that we can actually, instead of having the flashing yellow arrow, we can just display a red arrow when there's a pedestrian in that crosswalk, especially on some of these wide streets where we have like 2, 3 conflicting lanes of traffic. It can get, it's a lot sort of to ask of the person making a left turn to find a gap in, 2 or 3 lanes of traffic and a crosswalk that's, pretty far away from where they're at. So we can sort of use the signal operation to separate out the vehicle and pedestrian movements to make it safer for the ped. One final thing that I don't have on here is just overhead lighting in general, not traffic lights, but overhead lighting, illumination. From the crash data so far, as Eric mentioned, we're going to dig into it a little bit more to look for, time of day, lighting conditions, things like that. It does seem that we may have some trends, in some corridors trending, sort of towards dark conditions when we're having a lot of crashes. So that's something we'll look at as well. That's all I have. Eric, if you have any closing thoughts here. I think we're right at the time that we planned.
No, no more thoughts. I think we can get into our breakout rooms. So I'll turn it over to maybe Christina. Are you managing that?
Yep, I have the breakout rooms set up and I will send you to them now. We have 20 minutes to discuss in breakout rooms and then we'll pull everyone back for 5 minutes of final wrap-up comments. So enjoy the discussion.
Thank you, Christina.
All right. You guys might have to join manually. Okay.
I'm going to Ben Salem, right? Yep, go to Ben Salem. Shit.
Okay. I think we're waiting for maybe a couple of other folks, or is this about it? What do you think, Rick?
How many do we have in here? We have 7. I count. Yeah, I think we're there. I don't think there's anybody else ready. Vince is here. Mark's here. Marco's there. And okay. Yeah, I think this is about it.
All right. So you guys have met me. Again, I have some local knowledge, used to live in these areas for many years. But does anyone else live live near the Ben Salem location or the Tullytown location? Just out of curiosity. Or are you familiar with these areas?
I don't live there, but I've obviously been through there many times in my travels throughout the county, and obviously I'm well aware of things. So I'm interested to hear what the rest of the group has to say.
I'm familiar with it from having walked it as a SEPTA employee when we made a shift a number of years ago to take the Route 128 bus down Street Road from Knights Road when we rerouted it. And I understand the challenges of trying to identify actually even places just to put bus stops that serve the retail corridor, because there just weren't good places to put them where you could cross the street. And then, of course, the Tullytown location, because of the train station. We also have bus service that's in that area too.
Great.
I'm familiar with it from the PennDOT point of view. Looking at it through, I was not part of the DVRPC study or the RSA in 2008. That was Larry Bucci, but you know, I've worked with Larry when he came back with the study and tried to incorporate what we could. You know, familiar with the fact that there's a lot of commercial business and a lot of distractions through the corridor. Like you said, the driveways, there's the corridor itself has a lot of commercial distractions, I guess is, you know, what you could call it. So,
Sure.
you know, and then trying to get the timing on the signals just right is has been I know one of our biggest goals, and it is tricky, the amount of traffic and pedestrians, and so we need to look at more of a mode of all modes of transportation, and you know, so you know, I'm hoping here to hear what people have to say, and hopefully it can help.
Well, Eric, I don't think it's the message is just, I know from a traffic engineering standpoint, you have to look at it from the context of the crashes that have happened, the fatalities, the injuries. But I think you also have to look at it in the context of the interface between the transportation and the land use, from why people aren't using public transit or aren't walking from adjacent locations, because they find it to be unsafe to get across. And so the numbers would be higher if everybody that wanted to do it probably was actually doing it. So those are things that I think need to come into play to say, we want a better community. So we want to make it more attractive for people to not get in their cars to go places. This is one way of doing that.
Yeah, sure. And one thing that we'll look at is bus stops in all of these areas. You know, are the bus stops safe? Are they accessible? If we have more people that are attracted to these bus stops, obviously we need to make their pedestrian connection safe as well. So that's a domino effect, and these are all things that we'll look at for sure.
Eric, I was wondering, Ed, are you aware of who everybody is in this room? Ed's on our board, our BCPC board. So I'm just wondering, do you know who everybody is? And maybe quick introductions if Ed's not familiar with everybody in this room, because we all know each other. So maybe, in fact, I'll just do it for us. Vince Serbone is with PennDOT. Erica Morgan is with McCormick Taylor. Eric Schmidt, McCormick Taylor. Mark Castle is with SEPTA, and Marco is with DVRPC. And you're local to Ben Salem. So actually, out of everybody in this room, no offense to anybody else, I'm more interested in what Ed has to say.
Yeah, because that intersection's been a big topic of discussion.
Yes, yes.
You know, and yeah, because of the nature of us getting that the worst intersection in
dubious is a good word for that.
Yeah. I know I jumped on late. I'm kind of, you know, I really like well, first of all, my input is we definitely need to do some improvement with that intersection. That's for sure. We have a number of apartments that reside along that corridor, if you will, more so on Knights Road.
Mhm.
So we do see a lot of heavy pedestrian traffic crossing that intersection a lot.
Yep.
We have the Cole Shopping Center, and people are trying to get across there to do their shopping. There's a doctor there on the corner. I know a number of the residents that live in those apartments actually go to that doctor. So, and again, they're trying to cross Street Road. So it's a really high traffic area. And we definitely need some improvement there. I really like the pedestrian proposal crossing.
Yeah.
And I'm just kind of curious, and I jumped on late, do we have an ETA on design, development, and finalization of what we're going to recommend?
So our study we're slated to finish this year at some point. That's to be determined. So the concept development, that whole process will be this year. That's the most I can say.
Well, and since you're unaware, this is actually funded with DVRPC's Transportation Community Development Initiative money. So this can only be conceptual. So when you use words like design and engineering, that's not part of the study. This is sort of to flesh out some ideas, some concepts that we can take to the next level once we determine what the most appropriate solution is.
So just to be clear, the funding is specifically just for this concept plan, not necessarily for any other concrete definitive plans then?
Correct. And the total funding, I think, was about $75,000. So that obviously only gets us a study and gets us concepts and allows us to do sort of the conceptual work as well as the public outreach that's necessary to take a project to the next step.
Understood.
When you said the crossings, as far, are you talking about the bridges themselves?
Yeah, the bridges that were proposed in the prior screen.
Well,
yeah, I see it there.
Yeah, we're looking at that. Unfortunately, we're hearing a lot of negative feedback on bridges. They take up a lot of room. They cost a lot of money, and people aren't using them. And unless you basically put cattle chutes and force them to use them, they don't use it. So this is going to be a struggle, especially in this area where there's very little right of way to do something like this.
Right.
So I don't want to give you false hope is my point.
Yeah, I got you. No,
I like to be realistic. So
yeah, you're right. There is very limited space there. And I'm assuming you'd have to probably acquire some of that land if, depending on where you're looking to put it.
Yep. Yeah. And you've seen it out there. People aren't using existing crossings. So
no.
The hope that they would come down to a bridge and cross at the intersection.
Right.
Honestly, I'm not holding out much hope for this concept to move forward once we vet it completely.
Well, fair enough. But then what are the other solutions to make this intersection more safe?
And that's why we hired Eric and his crew to hopefully determine those solutions, because there's nothing it's just a no-brainer at this point. So we wanted to investigate everything, including the bridges, but we also realize we're not 100% sold on the bridges quite yet.
Right.
I just like being realistic when it comes to
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm gonna tell you the car wash there, they're not gonna want that in front of them. I can tell you that right now.
Of course. Yeah.
I think it's important to know that people are in the bridges that have been built for pedestrians. What we've seen is that they won't go up and over when, unfortunately, these are not, and it's a very expensive venture. You're going to look at anywhere from anywhere from $1 to $2 million, depending on the cost of the real estate there. It's definitely going to cost $1 million to build the bridge, and how many pedestrians are going to go up and over is the question. And I can tell you the one on the old 40-foot road that we have in Montgomery County does not get used hardly ever. We often see people just crossing right underneath it, which is, I'm sure, heartbreaking.
Yeah.
To the municipality.
Right.
Yeah.
Especially
if you're still seeing more accidents, right?
Yeah. So, I think we need to, trust what Eric can come up with and think more along the lines of how we can do some type of corridor work with all the pedestrians, including connecting all the sidewalks, and including getting maybe, looking at, like I said, timing on this corridor with the signals is has been something that we at PennDOT, would somehow like to tackle. And if we could do that, we can maybe come up with enough time to get pedestrians across on their own signal. Now, at this intersection, obviously we can't do that. So
Yeah.
I don't know if Eric will come up with, and I'm certainly not going to try and push Eric in any direction. So I really don't want to create too much here, but because I'm interested in to see what they would come up with, and some kind of pedestrian refuge in between, obviously straightening out the intersection. Something along those lines. So I do agree that we need to come up with something, and we'll do that.
Right. And I guess part of this too is not just physical construction. There's driver behavior, there's pedestrian behavior, all contributing to the problems out there. I mean, you could sit there and watch people, they'll have the white handman and the cars are still running the light and going through the intersection. So it's not the pedestrian at that point, it's the driver, but then I was going to say, then there's also pedestrians not crossing at the signal when there is a full-blown crosswalk. So
that's correct.
tough,
Yeah, we
tough,
see
tough.
them crossing somewhere along Street Road.
Right.
We're running across.
Right.
Yeah.
It's tricky, and like Mark and I mentioned, we need to think about all modes of transportation here, because it is something that's needed here. There is every mode of transportation that you can think of, including bicycles. So, getting them down the corridor and across is of utmost importance. And I really think that, when I drive Street Road, I often think about, the commercial distractions. There's so much to look at, so much signing, so many different driveways, the pedestrians, the bicyclists, there's just so many things that are distractions to the driver. And, if we could somehow get that incorporated into certain locations, that's going to be key for us on Street Road.
Yeah. Can I also say that sidewalks is important too as well?
Absolutely.
When we see plans come in front of us, I'm a stickler with making sure that we're putting the sidewalks in there. I know we've gotten into that custom of waiving them in lieu of a fee, but you run into this type of problem where we're seeing so many stretches of highway that just don't have the sidewalks, and I guess I would love to get your feedback in terms of their argument is, well, Ed, they don't want to be walking on a sidewalk on a busy road anyway. So they're arguing the fact that it's dangerous to actually walk on a sidewalk just because it's a busy road.
Right.
Yeah.
But where will they walk if they don't have a sidewalk?
They're gonna be there, so you have to provide
we know they're doing it already. So
right.
Well, we know on New Falls Road they're using the shoulder. We know that. So I would imagine they're doing the same thing here, and so they are using it, and so I really thank you for pushing sidewalks. There's no question it's needed.
I agree with that as well. And the argument we hear is, well, there's no sidewalks on either side now, so why do we have to put one in? And
right.
Because if you don't start now, then the next guy doesn't put it in either.
That's right. You got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Is it unusual, Eric? I know your earlier part of your presentation, you had noted that there was a lot of sidewalks and ADA ramps that were missing further down south on Street Road. I mean, is it unusual that you're seeing so many stretches of roadway where you're not seeing those sidewalks?
Yeah, the numbers surprise me, to be honest. It is common, but not for these long stretches that I'm seeing.
And not with that much commercial business along the corridor. You typically do see sidewalk when you have that much commercial business on a corridor like this.
Yeah, and I'll say one other thing too as well in terms of the commercial business. If you notice, if you pan back out a little bit, a lot of that business is set back more off of Street Road, And now I know development is now trying to push more of those storefronts closer to the highway, because then it's forcing us to put the sidewalks in. But then to your point, Vince, about distractions, is that further distracting drivers because those storefronts are even closer to the road?
Well, I think at least my opinion is that, you know, as long as you're seeing a lot more development of commercial businesses, that, you know, you have access in and out is going to be one location, and everybody gets funneled to that location that's on the property. And that's what we need to start to think more of.
Right.
Like, you know, back in the 70s and 80s, we just opened it up to the car can, you know, cars can pull in wherever they want, and there's just too much access.
Yeah,
so
we had
need
that same issue down where the Kmart's at, or where it used to be a Kmart, down on the corner of Humeville and Street Road. Yeah, right there at the Brookwood, we have a number of different access points there, and it does confuse people, or you're just constantly seeing cars coming out of different areas there. Along
I know an HOPs in PennDOT, we're you know, it's sometimes the developers, they want to put more and more businesses in one spot, and you know, we're saying, no, you're getting this one access, so you're going to have to funnel that traffic through to it.
Right.
And I think that the missing sidewalks in many cases are in areas where they're older shopping centers, older developments that didn't have the requirements in place at that particular time. As there's retrofitting that takes place, et cetera, that's where some of the opportunity lies. But back to your point about building up closer to the curb line, so to speak. I don't know whether they've done any studies on this, but I know King of Prussia has made some specific efforts in Upper Merion Township to build more up towards the roadway. And I think the concept behind it is that, in fact, it makes it more of a feel like a more urbanized area, like a Bristol, like a Doylestown, like maybe those aren't the greatest examples, but you know, the kind of places where people feel the need to slow down because there's close proximity to the storefronts, there's people walking, there's activity going on, and people know Morrisville. You know, there's a totally different sense of how you should proceed through Morrisville than there would be through this area. You know, I understand there's also more lanes to deal with, but the idea is you think of it differently because visually it looks like it's more compact.
Got it.
And Mark, it's sort of a form of traffic calming. I was just going to say, we only have about a half minute left in our breakout room. So Ed, feel free to reach out to me, email, and any concepts, anything you think about after the meeting that.
All right. Yeah.
We're here to discuss.
Just real quick, we are looking at an overlay plan that would spell out revised plans as far as, you know, if there was any new development for some of these older shopping centers, that it would bring that development up front. The overlay plan actually covers from Humeville Road along Street Road all the way to Knights.
Okay. Good.
Great.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna get sent back. Closes in exactly 2 minutes, so we've got another minute and a half to go.
Yeah, so if you can pan out, you can see where the overlay plan is going to be, since we have a minute left there.
Okay.
Pan out off the street view.
Do you have any kind of background information maybe it might help Eric out with his discussion based upon that overlay, or is it just sort of
all it is right now, it's just a draft plan that I have.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good to know.
Yeah, so it goes all the way from Humeville and then all the way up to Knights Road.
Okay.
And then keep in mind is that Armstrong right there where that big empty spot is we're looking at development too as well.
Oh, the old school.
Yeah. So that's being considered in terms of what our overlay plan is supposed to look like.
Okay.
So we're trying to fit this overlay plan on top of what the development's being proposed for that Armstrong school.
Okay.
What is being proposed at this point?
The plan that came in front of us previously was a combination of townhomes and retail commercial. Retail commercial more up on the frontage of Street Road, townhomes in the back. But
Okay, thanks.
that got turned down, and we're waiting for a new plan to be submitted by a developer.
Okay.
Where will the flea markets take place then?
Yeah, we're the Lions Club. Yeah, yeah. We're looking at other options, but that developer was open to still allowing to have them utilize that space.
Ed, can you tell us who the developer is?
Yeah, his name's Jay Pandya.
Okay.
He's the guy. He owns Boston Market. He just
Okay.
recently purchased.
Okay.
Okay, we're closing in 5 seconds, so I'll see everybody back in the main room.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, that works seamlessly. Nice work, Christina.
No worries.
I hope everybody had a good discussion in the other room. Ours was going so good, I didn't hop out of that. And, some good insight from Ed there. So I guess we've sort of reached the part where we're concluding, and it's actually finishing right on time at 6:57. So I want to thank everybody for attending. I also want to let you know that we recognize that it's not just physical improvements. There's driver behavior, there's pedestrian behavior. Those are all contributing to the problems we have out there. So we're going to continue to look at those issues and hopefully come up with some solutions. And as we develop those solutions, obviously the municipalities are key to this, as well as PennDOT and SEPTA, and the TMA can help out with some TDM strategies. So this is going to take a team to accomplish any of these goals. And again, I'd like to thank everybody for coming out. And Christina has been putting the link to our project portal in the chat box. And that basically contains all the background information as well as presentations. We're going to include this meeting in there as well. And if anybody wants to get in touch with me as the project manager, my email is rgbrailer@buckscounty.org. It should have been on one of the meeting registration reminders that you received. And feel free to reach out to me anytime any ideas or concepts come up, and we can certainly, wow, Christina's quick. Thank you. She put my email right there in the chat. Just want to again thank everybody. And the next steps are basically Eric and his team are going to take back some of the information we discussed tonight, as well as the information he's already developed, and start sort of formalizing all that. We intend to have another public meeting, which will probably announce some of the results of this sort of as a draft. And then we'll try to wrap this up, like you said, by the end of the year. So anybody has any last minute questions or concerns, certainly feel free to let me know. And otherwise, everybody can have a great night. And I think Jeopardy's on in a minute or so. So you want to go watch Jeopardy, it's a good time for it.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you, Rich. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Rich. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Eric.
Take
Thanks,
care,
Eric.
everyone. Have a good night.
You too.